Welcome.
Here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the folks in the live chat. Let me go over here. At the
Maliah,
what?
are you at the farmer's market? Because Maliah is, and Walter's drinking from the Gil Bavez critical.
Gil Bavel, Cardinal Sin,
Okay, Bavez
our
is
buddy.
kind of funny too, though. Ari will get it.
Gil
Welcome,
Bavez.
everyone.
That's that. You know what? What happened was Gil actually is living somewhere in South America under the name Gil Bavez. What it is look for Gil with a skinny mustache. That's what he did.
Talking
He grew
in a Christopher Walken accent.
he grew a skinny mustache, and Ari knows the secret, and he's just not sharing with us, right, Ari?
Hey.
Anyway,
Welcome,
so here we are, and folks, wow, here it is, the book that we'll be jumping into and referring to, but we couldn't really ignore this discussion, because really the Ukraine conflict represents the premise of NYMZA. What do we mean by that? And I'm going to get in here and share with you some definitions for those who are wondering, what the heck is NYMZA? What is Bosley talking about? Those of you who are regulars, you know what I'm talking about. NYMZA is something I've been talking about and writing about for a while. And anyway, as I said, the Ukraine conflict is just a perfect example of NYMZA in today's world. So essentially, NYMZA being the organization that I propose was behind the rise of Nazi Germany, and was behind the push through German scientists during the war to propose Operation Paperclip, which they did. It was the German scientists that proposed Operation Paperclip. It wasn't something that our side came up with and went to them. No. They went to Colonel Harry Armstrong, one of them, and said, "Hey, I can get you a whole bunch more of guys like me and bring us to America, and we'll work for you." Well, folks, this is what I propose in this book. Operation Paperclip was the Trojan horse moment in which the Nazi apparatus and the people really behind the Nazi apparatus, they saw the writing on the wall. Germany was, they had pretty much driven Germany into a defeat, and they had to jump ship, but from one ship to another. And as you'll learn, as we talk more and as people read my book, you will see that this is a pattern of this particular interesting, exclusive little culture that is behind NYMZA, is behind the Prussian movement, so to speak, and they were behind the unification of Germany and so forth. So they've had this vision dating back to medieval times, and a little something called the Bull of Rimini, which again I'm going to be sharing what that is. So NYMZA, to begin with, is a word we get from Charles Delchau, right?
Well,
yeah, the guy who
the common understanding or term that we're referring to is Delchau, right? Or Delchau's the first one.
NYMZA originates with Charles Delchau. We didn't know anything about this. There are no other sources yet referring to this word earlier than Charles Delchau, and this was a reference that was sometime between 1893 and 1923. Right. 23 being the years that Delchau died. Now, Charles Delchau, he talks about the NYMZA strictly in relation to the mysterious. I tend to use that word a lot when doing my research. The Sonora Aero Club. Okay, now this was the group of German immigrants in Northern California, actually up in the gold country next to Yosemite, who were allegedly experimenting with counter-gravity technology. Okay, um, flying machines, but in the 1850s, the decade prior to the U.S. Civil War. And Delschow describes NYMZA as this very secretive organization headquartered in Germany, who was kind of sponsoring the Sonora Aero Club, but Delschow says NYMZA was sponsoring other organizations too. And the implication is that NYMZA was something bigger. NYMZA was something out there with a wider footprint, than just the little Sonora Aero Club up in Tuolumne County, California. So what did I do? I started pulling some threads, and what I found were bits of suggestion, evidence that NYMZA, whatever they were, continued on through the remaining years, decades of the 19th century into the 20th century. And certainly, I think, this is my speculation, my hypothesis, they were really ultimately behind the rise of Nazi Germany. So for those who want to know what NYMZA means, NYMZA, here's the thing. Delschow never explained that to us. All he did was give us this acronym. It was all capital letters, NYMZA, but also this coded spelling of it, which is in the various books. Now, what I did was to work out a possible translation. Okay, it's just suggested. I have no way of knowing if this is accurate or not, but I'm going to share that with you. I took the NYMZA as an acronym. Mm-hmm. I took the fact that Delschow said at the time, to the extent he knew, because he claimed NYMZA sent him to America from Germany. It was all about the flying airships and their interest in this counter-gravity technology with flying machines. Okay, and when I say airships, I don't mean balloons or zeppelins, things like that. So,
right, very important note there, because Delschow out of Sonora County, and well, not Sonora County,
Tuolumne
County, that comes into the picture. These serious looking airships, which lead to, can I reveal that it's basically a turbine, right?
I am convinced that, yeah, it was the Rankine turbine, which was published in 1849 by Macorne Rankine, one of the two fathers of the study of thermodynamics. And this schematic of the Rankine turbine is identical. Just there's one thing down here and another thing up here, but it's all the exact same elements that Delschow puts forth in his writings and in his drawings, that Peter Menace and the other gentlemen of the Sonora Aero Club used in these flying contraptions.
Right.
So yeah, definitely, it's a Rankine, Rankine. Look it up. You can find it out there. No, Rankine.
Rankine.
Yeah. I have mispronounced it wrong in the past. I think I did that again. Okay, so based on the fact that it had to do with flying stuff, I came up with purely speculative, just something because people were coming up with trying to interpret the NYMZA acronym, NYMZA, and they were coming up with like the New York Motor Zephyr Association, but what I came up with was the fact that it was a German telling us the story. It was a German organization. If you've studied languages and you're a linguist or anything, you understand what transliteration is. That's where you use letters from your alphabet to spell words in a foreign language, right, particularly that use a different alphabet than your own. So uh, I propose that that's what Delsha was doing, or if he was doing that, then what the NYMZA actually was. No. Just ignore it.
All right, we got it.
Ignore it. What the NYMZA is transliterated acronym for German words. And what I came up with was the Nationalistisch Jagdflugzeugmaschinensammlungsamt. Now, what the hell does that mean in English? In my opinion, it was something along the lines of the National Pursuit Reconnaissance Airship Program Office. Okay, nationalist. Now, that's
very important distinction there.
Yeah,
right?
because national means something that's official of a government. Nationalist is a political position, a political point of view if you're a nationalist. Now, remember, there was no single German unified Germany nation back in the 1850s. There were only the 40 something Prussian states, around 40. And there was a push for unification into one Germany, one nation. And so the nationalists were all about that. And the Prussians were really behind this. And we know that NYMZA was a Prussian organization because Delsha refers to a Prussian representative that is sent from Germany to California to observe and report on the Sonora Aero Club and to tell them that the organization wants military flying craft, which the club was against. But we're not here to discuss the history of the Sonora Aero Club. I'm just kind of giving you a quick background as to where we get this term. Now,
acronym NYMZA.
Yeah. And so the threads I pulled led me to propose that NYMZA continued on after the Sonora Aero Club disappeared and they had their hand in continued research into counter-gravity and flight technology through the remainder of the 19th century. Now, I think the airship ministry of the 1890s was an American group, not the German group. But based on witness reports, the group flying the airships in the 1890s were using advanced versions of what the German group in the Sonora Aero Club was using. So what were the Germans under NYMZA doing during the 1890s? We have a few sighting reports in South America and other parts of the world. So I propose that they were still active. Now, going into the 20th century, they were pushing German society, German politics, German industry towards what would result in the rise of the Nazi Party. And NYMZA, in my opinion, is the cabal, if that works for you, behind the rise of the Nazi Party. And by the time we get to World War II, and we're looking at Germany losing the war, NYMZA, the cabal, decides to do what they had done since medieval times, and that is ingratiate themselves with a new host. Okay, oh, we'll help you. We'll build you up to be great. We'll do all these things for you, so that they could get in there and get their hooks, their talons into that host.
That's very specifically talons.
Yeah, yeah, and then what they do is they begin to take over from within. They begin to possess that host. They begin to influence that host primarily through industry, making themselves indispensable, which they did with the really being the brains behind or the main inspiration behind the buildup of our military-industrial complex. Thanks to the Cold War paranoia, we said, yeah, sure, we'll go along. All right. And I say the invasion was Operation Paperclip. I say the coup, the actual coup in which they seized substantial power and influence over our government primarily, was the JFK assassination. Of course, you guys have heard me talk about this. Now, people say, what is the historical argument for a group like this NYMZA cabal, wanting to take over much of the world as much as they can. Well, and this is what leads into the Putin discussion today. Okay. During the medieval era, when the subculture, the exclusive subculture that I argue really founded NYMZA, the Prussians, okay, they started out as the Junkers, the Betel Junkers, okay, and they would do this. They would ingratiate themselves with a city state, okay. They would do all these great things, build up the strength of that city state, and then they would start buddying up to that city state's enemies, okay, and then start doing things to tear down the current host, so that by the time the current host was vulnerable, they were ready to jump to the new host, the other city state. And then once they had done this and seized control of all the German states, the Prussian states, and so pretty much had control of most of them, then they started looking beyond the borders of what we know as Germany. Now, the important point in this is that the Bull of Rimini gave them their justification back then, but here's the scary thing. It continues to this day, right? One could argue, to be their justification for, as this NYMZA, this post-World War II, Nazi international cabal, to take over as much as they can. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, let me share with you real quick. And this is what we're seeing, for example, what's going on in the Ukraine through NATO and the United States military industrial complex. Okay. Now let me go to the Bull of Rimini. Tomato. Here we go. Here we have, this all has to do with the Teutonic Knights. And there was a limit to the Knights' Charter, see. The territory reserved for the order was clearly defined in a written agreement drawn up between the king and Grand Master of the order. Nevertheless, Andrew soon made the complaint that the knights were widely trespassing beyond the borders outlined for them, that they were coining money without authority, and finally had so cleverly maneuvered at Rome that the Pope had consented to take the territory occupied by them directly under his protection. This allowed the knights to consider this territory no longer subject to the king. So they went to an external authority willing to back them up regarding a territorial issue in their own country. Okay, and they usurped, with the help of the Pope, okay, they usurped the authority of the king in their own country. Now, this ultimately led to the Bull of Rimini. In the heat of the Prussian Crusade, the Bull of Rimini was issued by Frederick II in 1235 and was backdated to 1226. So it's backdated, 9 years. The decree granted license for territorial conquest to the Teutonic Knights and gave them power to acquire lands and resources. It was just what von Salza was looking for after the public relations disaster in Poland. The Rimini, the Bull of Rimini decree, afforded the order, the Teutonic order, get this is a quote from it, eternal and absolute ownership of any territory it conquered. Okay, keep that in mind. Any territory it conquered. It is in the language of these documents where we have the problem. Okay. Paul Winkler, the author of The 1,000-Year Conspiracy, he interprets the Bill of Rimini as follows. He considers it a charter for future action. Future action, okay? Quoting Winkler, A permanent charter for all Prussian conquest and all German political expansion, which during centuries to come and until this day was to radiate from that territory. The uncompromising spirit with which the Teutonic Order pursued its aim sprang from the imperial mission which was entrusted to the order in this bull. A bull is a document and decree. The pretext of a religious mission justified such purposes. This is, in fact, the very origin of the secular conflict between popes and emperors. Frederick specified that his mission of empire was directed not less to subjugation than to conversion of the people. Okay, so not just keeping them down, he wanted to convert them to his way of thinking. This phrase, moreover, is a clear indication of the methods by which the order was to carry out the imperial mission entrusted to it by the bull. The Bull of Rimini states that in this spirit, and by virtue of the invitation of Duke Conrad of Masovia, the Teutonic Order is charged with conquering the territory described in very vague terms. The order shall enjoy the old and due imperial rights over mountains, plains, rivers, forests, and seas. Okay? The bull further confirms that all territory conquered or received as a gift by the order shall belong to it entirely, with all the rights and privileges of a sovereign imperial prince, including the right to levy taxes and duties, coin money, exploit all sorts of mines, name judges, impose territorial laws, etc. German historians of the Teutonic Order note with satisfaction that by this bull, the order was provided for a long time ahead with a broad plan of action. The order was henceforth to be bearer of the mission of expansion, which, according to Carolingian tradition, was the very essence of empire. Frederick II, the emperor who dreamed of world dominion, had given the order an impetus which was to keep its full force for many centuries. The knights began the campaign with a firm resolve to keep their order exclusively all conquered territory, and to extend their conquests far beyond the lands of Culm and Prussia. Okay, you get the idea. I argue, and I'm not the only one, Paul Winkler argued this in 1937, before World War II broke out. Others we know, our friend Dr. Farrell, and other scholars understand that the Bull of Rimini was the license for the Nazi International to continue on after the war. And I definitely argue that that's what they were doing through Operation Paperclip. It was their idea. It was their Trojan horse. And under the Bull of Rimini, this medieval document, they believe they're just fulfilling their vision of empire.
Yep. Well, I think it's important to note this because we talked about it in our thumbnail that we're going to discuss some Putin stuff here. And everybody knows the interview that just happened with Tucker. Putin talks about the historic implications of when the U.S. specifically said no after they said yes. Because Putin had warned them, those people in the Caucasus that you're giving money to, that you're giving weapons to, that you're supporting, are not people you should be doing that with. Well, here's why.
Yeah, the Nazi cabal is, deeply rooted in the Ukraine.
Right.
Okay, and so here's the thing: how did this work? What is it that we're saying Putin versus NYMZA? What is it that is going on over in the Ukraine? Well, through this Trojan horse of Operation Paperclip, the Nazi scientists are welcomed with open arms by the United States, and the fans of the flames of the Cold War are fanned heavily. Okay, and in that fear and paranoia, we'll take help from anybody. These Nazi guys, okay, fine. And so they were really, really instrumental in the creation of our military-industrial complex. It really is a long-time German vision, how we went about that. And it was a bunch of Germans who helped us do it. Okay. So what were they doing? They were making their bed within the host's house. The military-industrial complex was the Nazi bed the NYMZA bed within the House, the United States House, okay, the American House. And they had to build that up first. Once they built it up sufficiently through the end of the 40s and through the 1950s, and they had started cutting their teeth on, pushing us into conflicts and wars because this kind of thing eventually would be good for industry, which I personally think, the fruition of that, the realization that that was going to work was us getting involved with Vietnam. Now, as we know, okay,
or in other words, we call it an industrial revolution in historical terms.
Well, in the
that time,
in the wider
war,
picture,
we had an industrial revolution,
an industrial advancement, to be sure. Yeah. So Vietnam
that required a lot of steel.
Yeah. So we wait a minute now.
I'll throw energy and steam into the mix too with the turbine.
Steam.
And
there
bring
we go.
It back to
in the
Sonora
jet age.
Because
So anyway, why the coup in '63? Because we had built up. They had built up our military-industrial complex. We had done it, and it was powerful enough politically, finally, to the point that when Kennedy, it was clear he was probably going to get us out of Vietnam and not commit to the conflict. In their opinion, Kennedy had to go. Now, why am I convinced that this was the coup moment? Because the assassination of JFK is right out of the Prussian Junkers playbook of the medieval era. Okay, I'm going to tell you about an organization called...
Wait. Oh. You have paper and pen, because this is super relative. And if you were paying attention to the Putin interview and some of the things he was talking, it's going to blow your mind that this book was published long before we knew what was going to be said. That's what makes this relevant. It's not, more than this, right?
Yeah.
And like, oh my goodness, yay. We finally get a moment for free press. And that's one of the things in quotes that came out of the time when Paperclip was actually being investigated, and we had it to the Supreme Court stage. And there's a journalist who states the importance of having true free press that is not influenced by these people, by the NYMZA, by the Nazis,
by any
kind of
political organization,
government. And it's a find it and read it.
Well, the assassination of JFK, the assassination of JFK was right out of the Prussian Junkers, who I say NYMZA, out of their handbook. And I write in my book the femme, the femme or the FEMA. It's, if I say femme, people are going to think of feminism. If I say FEMA, they're going to go, oh, FEMA. Just
trigger words.
Okay, just don't be triggered by that. Enter the FEMA. A manner of secret society, the FEMA established itself in all manners as a tribunal, judges and executioners. During the early decades of the 20th century, there were multiple political murders in Germany. Bavarian Deputy Karl Garris prepared a file of investigation on this, and he was shot dead. Okay? Paul Winkler, in his book, The 1,000-Year Conspiracy, writes the following. The two men who participated in the investigator's assassination escaped and were never apprehended. In any case, we know this much, that Garris, the investigator, had spoken of a conspiracy going back 1,000 years, which he intended to reveal. He must have been referring to one of the only two German organizations which stem from the Middle Ages, the FEMA and the Teutonic Order. And that's the end of Winkler's quote. Now, I go on and write, though the Knights claim to have been independent of the FEMA, it appears that the order, Teutonic Order, was still subject to the FEMA's reach. Even the Grand Master was suspected of association with the dreaded cabal. And here's another quote. One morning, two knights who were beyond reproach were found hanging from an oak tree outside of Marienburg, marked by the FEMA. The Grand Master was asked to prosecute the murderers. He did nothing. The others, enraged, again requested action from him, and now he declared in dead earnest, one should abstain from passing judgment on such things. Now, that's the end of that quote. What we're saying here is two of the finest knights of the best character, okay, were found lynched in a tree, and they knew who did it, and the Grand Master of the Order was reluctant to even speak out against this, much less go after the killers. That's because the FEMA is one of those organizations that had even the Grand Master shaking in his boots. Okay, the FEMA was a throwback to the feudal era. The Westphalian practice of manorial rights, lords over serfs, was its basis. From this that's an elitist group. Okay, those are elites. How they look at us, right? This is how the elites look at us. We are just serfs. They are our lords. From this emerged the secret death tribunal, a pagan entity and concept which masqueraded as a holy Christian body. This religious facade, also used by the Teutonic Order to great effect, was a means by which the FEMA and the Order could resist the old Roman law, which was the basis of German justice. Now, Winkler describes the FEMA like this: the existence of the FEMA was known, but its operations were secret. It was subject to no authority except the emperors. The latter, at a time not clearly defined in German history, had delegated this authority to the Archbishop of Cologne, who was head of the FEMA, at least nominally. Indeed, the FEMA tribunal had among its principal official tasks the punishment of crimes against religion, but in practice, its activity was entirely different. Okay? Now, you keep reading, you get to okay, here we go. This is where I think you had the Nazi international cabal, the NYMZA, who I call them the NYMZA, still functioning with a FEMA organization. Okay. Okay. There were jurors called the Freischaffen, and they served as enforcement and punishment, the enforcement and punishment apparatus of the FEMA. There were 100,000 of them across Germany, but they used mystery to their advantage. Now, this secretive organization, okay, that would go execute people who, were in their way, who they thought had to be eliminated, there were 100,000 of them, okay? And they were the ones who would carry out, they were the punishment apparatus, the enforcers, okay, like this massive Gestapo. Think of the Gestapo when you think of the FEMA, right? The Freischaffen, which is what they were called, kept their functions absolutely secret, identifying each other by secret signs. But even if they were not recognized by the average citizens, everyone knew that they managed to lay hands on their victims wherever they might be hiding. Its occult aspect contributed largely to increasing the terror which the FEMA inspired all over Germany. So my point is, think about how we talk about the conspiracy to kill JFK, particularly, when you bring in the Nazis, as Joseph Farrell has pointed out and others point out. The FEMA would use just open, you wouldn't know who did it, but you would see the victims. They would use terror. Well, I think everyone agrees that the very public assassination of JFK was
terrifying,
an act of terror.
Right.
Okay, not just murder, but terror. This was, in my opinion, that post-war Nazi cabal, which I call the NYMZA, this was their way of saying, see what happens. No matter how high and powerful you are, see what happens when you cross us. And because they were willing to do something so bold as to take out a president, and I do say that the FEMA division of the NYMZA, the post-war Nazi cabal, are the ones who took out JFK. They were the ones behind it, in my opinion. This was a total medieval style FEMA, which had been around for centuries. This was a FEMA operation of the Nazi cabal I call the NYMZA. So once they did that, then they really, really took greater control of the United States. And that led to what we're dealing with today, because we went into Vietnam, industrialists made a lot of money, And in every military conflict we've had, every military buildup, the military industrial complex has just made more and more and more money. Okay. And over the decades since Vietnam, we've had questionable conflicts, whether our involvement, the extent of our involvement, was questionable in a legitimate conflict, or whether the conflict was drummed up so that we could be there in our military industrial complex, benefit from this. It doesn't matter. That's what happened. So we go along. We're in the Cold War. Finally, the wall falls. There's a coup in the Soviet Union. Okay. Soviet Union goes away, and suddenly we find ourselves essentially, the Cold War's over, but my gosh, we have this apparatus, this military industrial complex, and they've got to have a new threat, a new enemy, a new reason to exist. So there you go. We poke our nose here, we poke our nose there, to keep, the war industry healthy and going. And, this leads to using the 9/11 situation, which itself is another discussion, using the 9/11 situation to go into Iraq and Afghanistan, which lasts 20 years. I mean, what the hell, people? Come on. Yeah. If that is the most obvious application of the desires of the military industrial complex, to have been in both those, for 20 years. So here we are, and you got the CIA, and you've got other players in our national security structure that are pushing through NATO, through the theme of NATO, in the Ukraine before the conflict begins. Now, okay, go back to World War II, and you can look up the history yourself. The Ukraine, unfortunately, has a very tight history with Nazi Germany during that war. Okay?
Can I interrupt?
Yes, please.
Okay, so earlier I talked about this really important quote, and I went and grabbed it because I find it super relative. This comes... I usually do this because in this quote it relates so dramatically to Paperclip, but the quote actually comes out in 1971 with the Pentagon Papers, which, if you know, this is something that is a result of Paperclip being investigated. Mm-hmm. All right, so here it goes. This is by Justice Hugo Black. It was published in the New York Times in 1971. In the First Amendment, the Founding Fathers gave the free press the protection it must have to fulfill its essential role in our democracy. The press was to serve the governed, not the governors. The government's power to censor the press was abolished so that the press would remain forever free to censure the government. The press was protected so that it could bear the secrets of government and inform the people. Only a free and unrestrained press can effectively expose the deception in government, and paramount among the responsibilities of a free press is the duty to prevent any part of the government from deceiving the people and sending them off to distant lands to die of foreign fevers and foreign shot and shell, end quote. So this is something that came out of what you were talking about, the coup d'etat point for the United States, when it was from this point on. Now, even things like this, the Pentagon Papers, is buried. It's kind of taken away from our understanding, because our ability as Americans to wipe away history and replace a lie, a fable, with truth, or sorry, the other way around.
Yeah, the truth with fable.
A fable.
We get what you meant.
Where the truth was, is wrapped up in yellow journalism and sensationalism. Now, this is something I do get very passionate about, because, hey, without the voices of the journalists who are like, hey, I'm here to check on you, government, and make sure you're doing the things you want. But when that press is receiving a lot of money from a specific party
Yeah.
who may not be the government, but they are definitely influenced by whatever government is in power.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we get in today's administration, something like Biden, something like we don't even have the full freedom of press anymore because of this regime.
Well, our mainstream media press is more corrupt and openly corrupt than it has ever been.
Oh, yeah.
And the narratives being pushed, like with the Ukraine conflict, the poor Ukraine, they're such victims. They're being victimized by the evil, dastardly Russians. But yet, when you look closer, you find out that that's not the case. And if you dare speak out against the popular narrative, wave your blue and gold flag. And I can only imagine there are heads exploding right now at Walter Bosley. If you don't go along with that narrative, people just go off on you. They flip out. You're demonized. But so we get to this with, you got all this history with the Ukraine and Nazi Germany. And we know that, look, whatever you think of the old Soviet Union, and I think the lowest of them, okay, I despised it. I worked the last years of the Cold War, and I was proud to work against the agents of the Soviet Union, okay? I'm not impressed with Marxism, all right? Maybe you younger guys who are enamored with a philosophy book you read in college or high school, you think it's great. But I could not stand the Soviet Union. Not a good thing. But during World War II, the Soviet Union gave more lives fighting Nazi Germany than the rest of us. Okay, just because Nazi Germany was going at them, and they really. So it was. They call it the Patriotic War. Okay, because it was literally existential for them. So there is no love lost between Russians and Nazis and anyone who embraces Nazis. And that's in the history. It's in the mix of the Ukraine, folks. Okay. And so really what we saw in a nutshell is the U.S. military industrial complex, really an attack dog of this NYMZA that I'm talking about here, of the post-war Nazi cabal, Nazi international cabal. And there's enough people making so much money that they didn't want to miss an opportunity. They didn't want to let an opportunity go by. They had to push, we got to go into Ukraine. There's going to be a conflict. But what they did was they created this conflict. They stirred the flames. Okay. The CIA was in there working, this to push towards conflict. Various parties were. And what that also did was it fired up the people in our national security community. I spent 20 years in that community. I know how that works. I believe me, I've seen it. I know how it works. You get people that, they mean well. They're in it for America. And when the boss man says, there's your enemy, then it's sometimes it's blind following of the directive.
You see that
boss says, I was younger in the 80s and I remember the dastardly Soviet Union. So anything the Russians do is the same as the Soviet Union. Now, I've tried to tell people that the wall fell. The Soviet Union fell over 30 years ago. Okay. And Russia became something else other than the Soviet Union. Not perfect by any means. Okay. Not perfect by any means, but they're not the Soviet Union. And the changes that have happened over the last 30 years have been substantial. Okay. So to continue to demonize them just like they're still the former Soviet Union. What that is a bunch of graybeards like me and older folks who are nostalgic for the 80s. They're nostalgic for the Cold War. Okay. They're getting boners because they think, that old nemesis, the Russians, they must be up to no good because, well, they simply are the Russians. So people get blinded to anything that the Russians will argue from their position. And of course, ultimately, that's Putin. Putin has tried. I've watched Putin explain this multiple times.
Me too. Since
And
2014,
yeah,
I remember being there in 2011 and 2012, like in media wise, being there, meaning watching live, getting the transcript same time as Associated Press got it.
mm-hmm.
That this is what's going on, guys. This is 2011. This is 2012 happening. This is 2013 happening.
2014,
2014.
especially, yeah.
It's done. It's a coup d'etat. Like he said, that's exactly what happened.
Here's the thing. I agree with the perspective. I'm personally convinced that our national security apparatus, with under the camouflage, the flag of NATO, was driven to serve the interests of our military-industrial complex to create this Ukrainian conflict. Okay, and Putin's not an idiot. The Russians know exactly that yes, I'm an American, and I'm telling you, my own country caused this bullshit. Okay? And, that's my position. So basically...
But in the same brain, NYMZA at the heart of it.
Well, yeah, NYMZA is the hand behind all of this. But they've been influencing our military-industrial complex through, I talk about, I list the congressmen, U.S. congressmen and senators who are on the two committees that really control the purse strings of our military-industrial complex, and how easily they could be influenced by these NYMZA
not to give it away out
agents.
Or anything, because really America doesn't. And I mean all of America. También ustedes en Mexico. This is how America sold its soul. There is accountability there. There is some sort of, attention and this kind of thing, except for, I would say, those who were completely sideswiped, believed the lie, fed on it, went ahead and took that in, right? Because, I mean, we didn't know. You can't say that 10 years ago, I didn't know 20 years ago that this is what was happening to my government.
Well, from the perspective of being in the national security community, I was in Iraq in 2003, and I remember one day we had to go to Nasiriyah, which is the ancient city of Ur, and that's where the ziggurat, the famous ziggurat, is. And we went, and I got to climb to the top of it. We're standing at the top of it, looking around, and I'd been there a couple of weeks, and I had been learning about some things, and it dawned on me that day, that moment. I'm like thinking, okay, now I get it when people say we're not here for the reasons we're told that we're here. It really sunk in. And then I had to survive Iraq for 2 weeks after that, because this kind of happened to me being in the running the double agent branch at Wright Pat for OSI, the day that I realized, wait a minute, they could be using this program for secret technology transfer, and us agents think that we're playing the game. And at that point, I kind of lost interest in the business that I was doing at that time. And so soon after that, I left them, went to work for some other guys. And then that was the same, red pill moment that I had at Wright Pat. I had on the top of the ziggurat of Ur. So I was beginning to realize, hey, wait a minute. What am I serving here? Going away every month to a foreign country, dangerous situations.
Right.
I'm serving.
Hey, I did military too, so I get to jump in that one. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm freezing.
Oh, okay. I began to wonder, what was I really serving? So all of this goes into my eventual understanding of what I talk about in this book, and so that's the perspective I'm coming from. So I see in all of that. I know a lot of people know the Nazi history of the Ukraine. I understand what Putin is saying about this, and so really, as today's show indicates, it's Putin versus NYMZA. This is what he's up against. It's a Nazi international cabal of sorts. Okay, that's what this NYMZA is, and unfortunately, it has had its claws for decades in the powerful United States military-industrial complex. And in this particular case, folks, it's my opinion, my position that we didn't do good, we didn't do right in this situation. Okay, and so Putin is faced, I think he sees, with another existential problem for Russia. Okay. And that is that the United States, quite frankly, acting like a bully that wants to get its way, um, is has been pushing under the camouflage of NATO, um, and the Ukraine is across an ocean and, many miles away from our shores. But the Ukraine was formerly part of the Soviet Union and right there, right up against Russia. So it's understandable that he sees an existential crisis going on with this Ukraine situation, because it's not just Russia versus the Ukraine. He knows, we all know, that it's a bigger game going on here. Um, so Putin, for whatever faults he has, there's things about, believe me, there's things about Russia that I don't approve of. I wouldn't want to live there. There's some civil rights type issues that, quite frankly, are a problem over there that I think should do differently. But I'm not going to live there. I'm not going to go there. But in this particular instance with this Ukraine conflict, let me see. I had invited. Yeah, I don't think. So, Putin has said repeatedly that what he's really fighting with the Ukraine, what Russia's really fighting, are present day Nazis. He has said it. He's used the term denazification more than once. Okay. And there's just a bunch of stubborn Americans who aren't listening. Okay. Look, if you're still one of those Americans who insists that the Nazis were defeated in 1945, wow. Okay. All right. Must be nice. That's kind of like believing that Oswald acted alone these days, right? There's so much evidence, and again, talk about it in this book. Read the Paul Winkler book, The 1,000-Year Conspiracy, which, by the way, was written in 1937, published in English in 1943, before the war was even over, and he's already predicting essentially what the Nazis ended up actually doing after the war. Okay? It's astonishing. In some ways, it'll break your heart when you read it, because you see in this book, this 1937 book, you see exactly what happened to the United States. Okay? And people will say, well, Walter, you were in your national security apparatus. You were a federal agent for the U.S., a military officer, former FBI, and all of that. Yeah, that's why I think I'm qualified to be pissed off about this. Because when I think about it, most of us, I was born a month and 20 days before the JFK assassination. Okay. So I've grown up in a United States that was increasingly puppet mastered by the post-war Nazi international cabal, which I call NYMZA, to borrow from Delshow, and never knew it. Never knew it until just a few years ago. Okay. Because I'll tell you, I didn't go to work in that world. I didn't go to work for the FBI. I didn't, earn a commission and earn that federal badge, and then after that, go off to dangerous places in counterterrorism. I didn't do all that to serve an industry. Sorry. I'm not naive. I know that we're, a capitalist market enterprise kind of country, and industry is the strength. And I'm all for us being involved in industry around the world, but not like that. Okay. So, I guess from my perspective, I'm a little more open to listening to what, for example, Putin has to say about this, because I've looked at the history, and I'm not the only one. This isn't something that, I've dreamed up. It's just something that I finally, saw and learned and realized.
Well, you said yourself it took you 10 years to get around to get to, okay, I have to write this book. I know enough.
Oh, yeah. After I learned this,
strings.
It was depressing, and I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. And then it sunk in finally, and I realized, okay, I've got to do this book. But going back to Putin, Putin isn't making it up that the denazification is a primary motive with the Ukraine. There are, I want to say, modern day Nazis, post-war, present day Nazis in the mix there, the hand in the Ukraine. Now, look, there's everybody knows about the Azov Battalion. Okay. They have their history with Nazism. Okay. They even still use a Nazi symbol in their official symbol. Now, come on, come on. Tell me that, that there's no Nazi, continuing, lingering Nazi influence. Even if Ukrainians have a bone to pick with the old Soviet Union's military, okay, any viciousness or anything, okay, I get that. But to embrace Nazism, that I can see why the Russians find that unacceptable. So I agree with people, and in my opinion, Putin is up against these Nazis, okay, this Nazi cabal, and they're rooted in deeply, and they're really pushing, as they have been for decades, our military-industrial complex to push into a conflict, because an open conflict, another world war would be
open conflict.
Yeah, would be a wet dream for our military-industrial complex. Okay, and
very sad.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, and unfortunately for us Americans, we need to wake up and see what players on our side have been doing and have done. But everybody knows America is in a world of hurt right now internally. Our politics are a dumpster fire. Everybody's been enraged since 9/11. And the rage has just gotten worse and worse and worse. And, if you have 5 people discussing something, you have 5 distinctly different opinions, all expressed in a rage.
Well, and not just opinions expressed in a rage. We're talking about unbased on facts opinion, somebody's critique that is not coming from a professional standpoint to be able to even really truly critique the material to begin with. I'm talking about these so-called naysayers that clutch their pearls at the thought that our military-industrial complex
would do anything
United
wrong.
States of America would do anything to harm their own people.
Well, I remind people all the time, I ask people when they say, how can you be critical of, you're a military officer, an American military officer? I say, do, rem, remember what it is I did in the Air Force. I was a special agent of the Air Force OSI. That essentially is an FBI within the Air Force. And what did we investigate? Criminal activity um, committed by military members. And we masked our rank in case an agent who happened to be an enlisted guy had to interrogate a bird colonel. We didn't want that bird colonel to know that that was a master sergeant, because then the bird colonel might try to pull rank. Why do we do that? Because we know there's corruption and bad people in the military. Oh my gosh, really? Americans, the vet bros out there that, nobody who's been in the military could ever do wrong. They're all fine, upstanding people. And yeah, 90% of them are, but I'm telling you, it was my job to know. And we saw, and I saw that, you know, there are bad elements, because wherever there are human beings, there's going to be bad apples, bad eggs. So yes, in our military industrial complex, in our national security community, come on, the history is just full of the corruption and the the bad things that have been done, either abusing authority, abusing money, and on and so forth. So this is why the blind faith, if my country and the media says, go forth, these are the good guys, those are the bad guys, then I'm going to take their word for it. And what you were mentioning is they don't really have to have a professional foundation. People just need to read more the facts. They need to look at the facts more with an open mind.
An opinion.
Well, yeah, but getting human beings to do that is like pulling teeth. But the point is, just be careful with the blind faith, and particularly in this situation, because if they push this into some big open conflict, it's going to be your sons and daughters, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, that are going to be deployed and pushed into a conflict from which they may never come back. Now, people say, "Oh, he sounds like a pacifist." No,
Alarmist.
I am not a pacifist. Okay. I personally got no problem going into military conflict, as long as it's the right thing, it's righteous, it's the good thing, it's proper. But if I thought for a minute that I was being deployed to something corrupt and wrong and faked and was a big lie, no way would I want to go risk my butt for that lie. Like I said, I wasn't, and none of our military people should be out there to serve an industry's interests. Okay. And you know what I mean by that. Okay. I know people, this idea of American empire, okay, an informal empire of influence, meaning if we go around the world and we do good and other places kind of like our style and adopt it, okay, that's the kind of empire that's okay. But when we go around playing the games we're playing like bullies, and all the while back home telling our people, rah, 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 give us the cheers, that's not the kind of conflict that I think we should be involved in. And really, I think what's going on with Ukraine is it's a local issue that shouldn't involve us.
Right. And like what Putin said in the interview, that if we don't understand why you're there, United States, why are you funding this? We've proven, we've shown it's there for the viewing
audience
and for yourselves. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
It could be easily ended, because it appears that you're the one who doesn't want it to be ended.
Right. We don't. There's elements in our government who are influenced by, again, the industrial representatives, the lobbyists, okay? And they keep their seats, they keep their power if they go along with this, okay? And to me, it's sick and twisted. to want to
Well, it's just
perpetuate
like
war
it's
for.
just like the I'm going to even call it an extreme because it is a extreme individual who personality disorder who comes to a covert narcissistic type of attitude here because not only is this entity causing you great amounts of trauma and pain, they're masking it so that you having any kind of say so about it makes you look bad. Okay. And then having something to, because they control the narrative is what I'm referring to. You know, they control the narrative. They say, grip your blue and gold, this kind of thing, support this. And so if you speak out against it, you're publicly shamed. It's the crabs in the boiling water again. You're being torn down by all those around you because that's how this regime maintains its control, essentially. So if you're going through this kind of fear and shame, that's why I call it a covert narcissism, like to the extreme level, because this entity is literally taking pleasure in nothing more than the fact that you are in pain and being caused trauma. And
Well,
we
yeah,
are in a trauma cycle.
yeah.
And if you mention 911, 9/11, you're in a trauma cycle.
Well,
Instantly triggered back to a memory of a time
yeah,
when we were
because that's
under
when
attack.
the attack, the major attack on the American psyche happened, and they've just kept us in a state of chaos.
Otherwise called
And the thing to
black
do
people.
is to, if you want to know, well, who on our side is pushing this? Well, you have to look at the Senate Armed Services Committee, um, blah, 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 the House Armed Services Committee, okay, um, and the Senate committee as well. And you got to watch the people who are on those committees and see how they vote. You got to see who's influencing them. Okay, that's where this NYMZA Nazi international cabal influence involved with our military industrial complex. That's where it happens. They influence our congressmen and women. Okay, to get them to vote in a certain way to keep the money flowing. And, and if that means keeping conflicts fired up, then that's what they do. Okay. Now the politicians are politicians and all that goes with that. So, at the time that I wrote this book, the House Armed Services Committee was chaired by Mike Rogers. Now, I don't know how many of these people are still there as of today. You have Mike Rogers, who I go into, who was instrumental in his career and the German connections to it. In fact, let me share this with you because you might ask me, Walter, what are these influences? Mike Rogers, a Republican, is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. His political background is interesting. Early in his journey, Rogers was promised with a seat on the committee should he win his election. The promise was made by Dennis Hastert, who was Speaker of the House back then. He was subsequently convicted of sexual advances on underage males. Hastert went on, after leaving Congress, to become an advisor to lobbyist law firm Dickstein Shapiro. Okay? Now, the founder, David Shapiro, of this law firm, served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Okay? And let's see.
Another narcissist. Yes, whoever's.
Okay. He once defended, even though he was Jewish himself, he still, being an American, once represented American Nazi Party leader George Lincoln Rockwell in a freedom of speech case. Okay, that's interesting. Dickstein Shapiro, the firm, merged with Robert Sheridan and Cotel, spun off from Cravath, Swaine, and Moore. You're saying, who are these names? These are law firms, okay? Now, Cravath of Cravath, Swaine, and Moore was an Atlantist, a political movement dating back prior to the First World War. Atlantists believed that the governments of North America and Europe should unite to promote globalist multiculturalism. Isn't that interesting? This is Cravath. Okay. Now, Cravath was a founder and director of the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay, think about their checkered association with globalism. Okay, and this Cravath guy. All right, now get this: Cravath, Swain, and Moore have a history with the industrialization of America. The firm represented Samuel F.B. Morse in the late 1840s. This is an old firm, okay? Cyrus McCormick, Elias Howe, and Charles Goodyear, these inventors, industrialists. George Westinghouse, they represented him. Now, let's see. We get down to the one, oh, here we go. Among the Dixon Shapiro clients was Bayer, the American subsidiary of Bayer AG, the famous German pharmaceutical company. In true Prussian Junkers Bull of Rimini fashion, Bayer extended the German clause to America in the mid-19th century through the marketing of aspirin. Now, why do I say that about Bayer? Because they did. They followed the model. Go out into the world, use industry and commerce. Okay, now, Dixon Shapiro represented Bayer. There's one German connection right there. Now, they brought that history and those associations to the law firm, okay, that employed Dennis Hastert after he was, convicted and kicked out of Congress. Huge career influence on Mike Rogers. The as of the writing of this, was the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. Now, this came out, I think, in October.
August.
Yeah, or maybe the summer, yeah. And this is the guy who's, the career influencer of Mike Rogers. This current guy who, in the House heads the committee that holds the purse strings to the military-industrial complex. Now, you could say, well, that doesn't mean there's Germans influencing Hastert, okay? But it doesn't mean there's not. Okay, this is how this works. You have to look for, the presence. And if the presence is there, the potential is there and has to be considered. So Rogers, you got to look at his background. Then you have, and it goes on. Rogers has been a major proponent of the Space Development Agency. Now we know, and I'm all for the space program. I haven't had a problem with the idea of Space Force. But these guys have their hands in the militarization of space for their own purposes, not for necessarily for the good of the world.
That's a very good way. We can bring up X slightly. No, I think it might take too much time, and we're coming.
Yeah,
to the
that's
end of it.
That's a
This
whole.
is a
Well, no, we
one.
still got to go into questions. This is a long
That's
one
what I
tonight,
mean.
folks.
But I do want to say that in a very near future show, we're going to Walter and I are going to go through an etymological deep dive into X, running off of what Dark Journalists brought forth about how, we have the X in Twitter now, we have SpaceX, and so many other things. And so I want to unpackage that in ancient languages and help to bring an understanding to our community of why the letter X is so important. And it leads back to the Maya, the Yucatan, and also Göbekli Tepe in that as well. And we can find a deep correlation there.
Speaking of technology, okay, now let's look at what I'm trying to do is explain to you, clarify how our congressmen can be influenced by the military-industrial complex. Now let's go to, this is still on the House committee, okay, and we come to, oh my gosh, where is it? I had it right here. Okay, here we go. We come to Pat Ryan. Hate when my fingers will.
Sticking together.
Yeah. We come to Pat Ryan. Pat Ryan is a West Point, this is congressman, A West Point graduate and U.S. Army intelligence officer, served in Iraq, okay, honorably. From there, Ryan went directly into the arms of the military-industrial complex, in my opinion. He worked for Barrico Technologies, training field operatives under subcontract in Afghanistan for Palantir Technologies, the company that brought us Palantir Metropolis, used by financial services, banks, and hedge funders. Now, in my footnote, I ask, I wonder if there's any Promise software connection to Palantir Tech. But anyway, I digress. Okay, Palantir also provided special software to Information Warfare Monitor, which used it to uncover 2 Chinese cyberspace spy networks, Shadow Network and GhostNet. Palantir software is used by the DHS, the NSA, the FBI, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, Special Operations Command, West Point, and the Joint IED Defeat Organization. One controversy involving Palantir is its development of Project Maven. Now, you'll like this, Leah. A classified artificial intelligence program facilitating the unmanned operation of aerial vehicles, which some argue could create autonomous machines willing and able to kill in the absence of human input to the contrary. Okay?
F-22 Raptor.
Project Maven. I think we need to learn more about this Project Maven.
Yeah.
Now, I informed the reader, this is from my book, one of Palantir's clients is Merck, the science and technology firm which, during World War II, was run by the Wehrwirtschaftsführer Karl Merck, who joined the Nazi Party in 1933. The company developed and manufactured war essential products using forced labor. Merck survived prosecution. Okay, here's the thing. This doesn't mean that Pat Ryan, the congressman, is aware of any dark, evil, negative.
At the same time,
post-World War II.
It doesn't mean that he's not aware.
Right, you can always say that, but I
Just go on the other side.
My point is that the influence is going to be camouflaged by layers, but you've got Merck in the history of this Palantir. In the mix with this Palantir Technologies, who, as I just said, are developing, the Terminator type of machines. Okay, that's the idea. So that's just another example of a congressman who could be completely influenced by the dark hand of this NYMZA, this Nazi international cabal. Okay, and that's just one example. And my point is, this is how this happens, where you get our leaders to go for these conflicts, and they'll take the word of, a lobbyist if the lobbyist is a specialist. Well, the lobbyist showed me a report.
Right. Putin talked about the specialist quite a bit.
Yeah. So
that was fun.
Here's the thing. Let me see if I. So basically, I hope that if you're new to all this, if you're new to the Walter Bosley channel, I know we've just been throwing a ton of stuff at you that you're going, whoa, wait, what the hell's he talking about? What's his book he's flashed? What the hell? Okay, but if you've been here a while, I think you're following what I'm saying. And this is why ultimately I see what Putin's talking about when he talks about his denazification mission. Okay? Folks, whether you agree with Putin's declared mission on this or not, denying this Nazi thread through this, well, that's just ignorant. You're being a fool. Okay, you're going along with the narrative that just puts blinders on. And I'll say this to my fellow Americans. Very much a part of keeping your freedom is, like many people have learned already, being critical of what your own country's doing, okay, in a healthy way. All right. And, I just think that's essential.
Yeah.
And so, who will win the conflict? I don't know. I hope it doesn't go into an open war. I hope that we don't directly, just start sending troops there and we're just openly, because how that will end up. That will be the World War III that some people want.
That he's warning about.
Yeah. I don't think they want it.
And not to tout that as fear-mongering or anything of the nature. It's a quote. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about something that affects the entire world and causes a mass destruction event.
Yeah. So,
This is a big deal.
or embroils us in a 4 or 5 year, highly destructive, conflict where we're just, my problem isn't here it is 2024 and we got too many people that still want it to be 1985. It's like, folks, get over your nostalgia. You're aging. We're all aging. Those times are past. Let's try to move forward and, make a new century, make a different world instead of clinging to this nostalgic past. Okay. And that's what a lot of people who, just go straight to the, nothing Putin says, no justification he gives is legitimate. That's what they're doing. It's just blind nostalgia and the propaganda. So before we go to questions, I've been blabbing. I'm sorry.
No, this is the Walter Bosley channel.
Yeah, but
Maliah
today
is just a guest.
Today, so here's the thing. Folks, if you're interested in asking questions in the live chat, you know the rules. If you're new, I'll tell them to you, and my moderators will remind you. My wrenches will remind you. If you want Maliah and I to acknowledge your comment or answer your question, it must. Okay, no exceptions. Please pay attention to this. It must be in all capital letters. Okay, there's a lot of side conversations.
This just helps us make sure we consider.
Thank you, Jean-Luc Picard, and thank you, Griffin Eagle, and thank you. Oh, yeah, it's twice Griffin Eagle. Okay, thank you. Very generous. Really appreciated.
He had a comment there.
Yes, yeah, we want to get to that.
Okay, all yours. You want the other ones though? The regular. See, you can click over here and get specific super chats, so you know where they are.
Let's.
Sorry, I'm always trying to show you.
Yeah, you're telling me tech stuff right now. That's not the time to do it.
I'm sorry. Here we go.
Okay.
All right, we've got some. Thank you guys. Thanks, Crypto. Nick is here. Michael's here.
Where is the
Brian, D. Dorothy, Michael McCausland, Griffin Eagle. Shout out.
Well, thank you, Brian. We appreciate it. You're welcome.
Black Rainbow Forward. Hey there.
Remember, folks, and look, if you have already asked a question, you've got to re-ask it. Retype it all caps. It's too hard for us to go scrolling back up looking for questions. So anyway, I think we shocked them with today's topic. They don't know what to ask.
I was monitoring pretty closely, and so there are some really interesting discussions, comments while we were talking. So yeah, I believe Tessa 111 is here. 1111. Modwiz is in the chat.
Hey, Modwiz.
I saw him.
Did I thank? Is that all the super chats so far?
Michael Dark's in the room.
Hey, Michael Dark. Is that all? Have I acknowledged
Yes.
all the? Okay, so there we go. And again, thank you, folks, for the super chats. Mm-hmm. It's very generous. And if you're interested in the book, walterbosley.com, NYMZA, How America Sold Its Soul. This is my most recent book. This one, I'll be honest with you, it was tough for me to get through this because the information, this was not fun. My other stuff on the explorers and the odd history and stuff. Napoleon, that's fun. But this was not a fun book to write as a researcher. Mm-hmm. This was, particularly with my background, it was rather depressing. Okay, D.E. Sakon asks, can you comment on Russian scientists and Cosmo Club, etc.? I'm not prepared to do that today. I really don't like to, jump in to something that I'm not prepared to address.
It's
But
a big topic. I can definitely talk to that. But as Walter said, this is a big topic, and my 2 cents on the table is from the microbiological standpoint in Russian scientists. If you mean of that sense, I kind of call microbiologist scientists. So, and that's relation to why also I think it's pretty well proven by now that is one of the main reasons the U.S. happens to be in Ukraine or fighting for Ukraine, funding it, blah, 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 doing a part in this is in the scientists, not Russian. I apologize.
but
USSR, we would say, or German
well,
scientists.
Soviet. But what he was referring to was specifically the Cosmos Club,
Right.
which Tillman was a part of. That DJ talks about where T. Townsend Brown is concerned, and
that's
so.
totally up your alley.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not
to the table is to talk about the.
I didn't read up on that before today's show.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. So D. Dorothy says Putin led. Well, I don't recall him being in command of the KGB. He was a KGB agent, but I don't know if you know this, but when the wall came down, he put in his resignation. He left the KGB. Putin is not. My opinion, Putin is not the demon that our national security apparatus has made him out to be. Modwiz says, I like the novelty of this angle of discussion for the Putin interview. Yeah, thank you, Modwiz. We wanted to not just talk about it in terms like everybody else is talking about, going through painstakingly and tediously. He said this and he said that. You can find that everywhere else. What we were hoping to do today was give you a context for Putin's comments about his mission of denazification. Okay, we're trying to give you the background of what he was meaning by that. And I hope we've succeeded to some point. I hope it's inspired some viewers and listeners to want to research this further, and of course, read the book. Nick N, is it difficult to detect? You mean the 1903 influence here? I have not seen anything that jumped out at me reflective of the 1903 yet, but that is an interesting question. If I do see something, believe me. Brian Evans asks, have you ever researched SS General Kammler? I think he may have been. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely, any of those guys with the weird exotic tech, their hands are in the mix with, you see, it's my opinion that NYMZA, remember, Delshow tells us NYMZA was behind sponsoring exotic technology research in the 1850s. Well, I think I have found when I pulled that thread, I think they continued into the 20th century and definitely had a hand in exotic technology research. So yes, Kammler, what he did, definitely the hand of NYMZA, 20th century NYMZA was involved in that. Griffin Eagle says the Dresden warm-up, that savagery. Yep, I know what you mean. Mike does international criminal for abducting children. Who?
I think he's talking about Russia. I'm not sure. Mike is being rather trollish, so you can do what you like. Not overtly though, which is why.
Let's see. Crypto Alchemist. Crypto Alchemist says Putin is just a good Russian president looking out for Russian interests. Yeah, that's the way I see it.
The Rusker Norse, Michael McCausland. Michael, yes.
Yeah, so let's see. Putin retired to go into politics. I do have sympathy for him. It was heartfelt. Yeah, well, yeah, he didn't just retire. He resigned. He walked away from it. It wasn't just that it coincided with he did his 20. He resigned. Let's see. Griffin Eagle 7. Walter, my question is above the comment. Okay. Can
you copy and paste it for us, Griffin? Because I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Aw, Sunny Sunday. Thank you. That's very sweet.
Okay, yeah, Griffin, you're going to have to. Oh, Sunny Sunday, thank you, thank you, thank you. Very generous. Yeah, just retype, Griffin, because it is it's
Right.
impossible to when it's live to be scrolling up and looking for.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. And Rodney Stubbert says, I'll need to watch the interview. However, I agree he's not the demon that CNN claims he is, and many others. Yeah, you know. Yeah, I'll tell you, after having done my deep dive with the Napoleon Bonaparte topic, it really opened my eyes even wider to the character assassination that goes on, with leaders throughout history.
I love that back. Imagination rules the world.
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
So, yes, thank you, Sonny.
Secret
Much
Missions
appreciated.
24. You can find that also at walterbosley.com in the shop.
Yeah, I do want to. This is not in all caps, and I think DE is commenting to someone else, but I recommend the Oliver Stone interviews with Putin.
Very good.
In fact, I recommend that you watch the various interviews with Putin that aren't chopped up by our mainstream media.
Very important.
Look, our mainstream media has been horrendous for a number of years. Just absolutely horrendous. It's shameful. The extent to that they'll go for a BS narrative.
Yes. Yep, I totally agreed. It was quite the headache coming of it.
Brian Evans says, yes, old blown apart had bad press. Yes, he did. 200 years of, quite frankly, British aristocratic, British oligarchical BS, because they were scared to death in Napoleon's lifetime that the people would embrace him. The British people would embrace him. That's why they were scared to exile Napoleon, which was really his brother, on English soil.
Okay.
So the problem I had with Tucker's interview with Putin was that Tucker didn't seem to be as prepared as he could have been. And, it was a clunky interview for Tucker Carlson. I don't dislike Tucker Carlson, but I have to admit he was clunky and awkward. I don't know if it was the translation barrier thing going on or what, but if he had just listened,
he was outmatched. He was just outmatched. It was sitting down to a chess game and not even realizing you're playing chess. It's there was a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And I want to make comment too. A lot of people have been saying, "Oh, well, Tucker Carlson knew Russian, and he didn't even have to use an earbud." Well,
how do they know that?
And how many, we know that news anchors who read the news read it from a teleprompter and are very good at not letting you know that they are doing
right.
That.
Exactly. But here's the other thing. I wasn't
aware. How do they know you didn't have an earbud? Those things can be invisible.
Did we not hear a translator?
Yes, in both languages.
So what is this crap
that's what they're saying.
I mean, I'm not aware that Tucker Carlson has ever been a Russian linguist, but
no,
I don't know.
Me neither. And maybe to some degrees he might have some a little bit, and I could be completely wrong. He could fluently speak Russian, but I've never heard about this before, and he's a public figure. So, I mean, it's beside the point. It's just kind of a goofy thing. Like, come on, guys.
It was a clunky interview. He could have done better.
There are many journalists out there that we consider part of NBC News or whatever, the mainstream media, that look at you without an earbud in and tell you exactly what they're, is going on right now.
So Crypto Alchemist says the reason the U.S. media establishment is in panic mode, they don't want the Western public to figure out our interests align more with Russia's than our elite's interests. You mean the people? And okay, the American people. that is an interesting discussion, by the way, the values discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I have issues with some of the civil rights positions of Russia, things that would make me not want to live there.
Right.
But I think in general, um, yeah, I think there's a values discussion that is very interesting. So Madwiz says Hindus called devas the gods and asuras the demons. Zoroastrians reverse the order. Politics creates convenient demons as suits their needs. Oh yeah, very good. Yeah, absolutely, Madwiz. You're right. You're right. Well, don't even get me started on people get all mystical and sentimental and superstitious about religion, but really step back. Uh, you have a religion that's been around for centuries, and some guys come up with a new religion. What's the first thing they do to the one that's been there a long time? They demonize it, they villainize it, they destroy it. And then what they do is they turn all the saints and angels or gods or whatever of that previous religion, they say, oh, those are all demons, ours are the true good guys. Okay, the same thing, folks, is going to happen to our religions now. I hate to tell you, but however long it takes, there's going to be a new religion come along, and all those things in the various religions that you hold so sacred, they're going to be identified as demons. They're going to be identified as villains. And the new religion is just going to be forced on people. So what does that tell you about religion? Okay. I personally have the position that you can believe in that supernatural metaphysical world. You can believe in a god or gods or whatever. To me, uh, religion and the reality of these beings are separate things. Okay, I don't trust religion. Religion is a construct of man. Okay, and flawed from the very beginning. All right, it's a control system that benefits the priesthood, whatever priesthood that is. Okay, talk about the biggest trust me, bro culture and organization in human history. It's any religion, their priesthood. Trust me, bro. So it's that's a good example, Modwiz, of using the religious example, because the same thing is done with politics, as you're saying. The same thing is done with politics now. Politics is really is a new religion for people. Marcus Toledo. One of the reasons JFK was wasted was the space program. It really died after his death. Yeah, there's something to be said. Well, it was altered greatly. Yeah, it was not allowed to really properly become what the vision was. Well, except for the classified stuff. I do think I've always thought there's a classified manned space program. I'm not going to call it SSP or Secret Space Program anymore, because there's a bunch of fools, idiots, and liars who have ruined that term as far as, the discussion.
Paul from Newcastle. Hey, good to see you. He's a regular.
Yes. Hello, Paul.
Oh, Mike's coming in and saying he is not a troll.
Okay.
Go to your
where do I go?
Super chats. Into super chats, remember?
Wait. Let me do this first. D. Dorothy asked, does Putin speak English? My understanding is that he does. But okay, so where do you want me to go?
There, Mike.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you, Mike. Good Lord. Well, wait a minute. He has a...
Oh, sorry.
Putin abolished the 1992 doctrine. Now he is dictator. The doctrine set term limits on its leaders.
He still wants to get in.
See, Mike brings up a good point. This is what I'm saying. Just because I favor Putin in this discussion doesn't mean I think he's perfect. Doesn't mean I agree with everything he's done, from my perspective of somebody that believes in a democratic republic and individual liberty and things like that, and elections and things like that. Yeah. Putin's very much a Russian guy. Okay. And so that's a very good point. just, on this issue, um, I happen to agree with him. So
then you could just
thank you very much, Mike. That's very generous of you.
You'll be untimed eventually.
What do I do?
Go back to the
live.
There you go.
Okay.
And then you're back to where you
were. Okay. See? Oh, there we go. There's Mike. So he's back with us, right?
In the super chat, I think you just timed him out for.
Yeah, okay. All right. Sorry about that. I have to call him on the fly sometimes, and so Michael McCausland asked, who are the lobbyists? Well, that's why I told you, look at the committees, look at the people who are on the committees, and look closer at how they're voting, what they're voting in support of, and you'll be able, and then from there, you can also further identify the lobbyists that they've met with or who have potentially influenced them if you can't be sure. There he is, he's back. So, any other questions
true,
or comments about the, what Putin is saying he's up against in the Ukraine?
Yeah. Yep.
Again, we'll not shy away from this subject. Talking about it again. I think a good groundwork was laid.
Dr. Farrell, hopefully.
Yeah, we got to get Dr. Farrell in here. I did invite him in case he had a free afternoon, but he's dealing with weather issues.
Yeah.
I think they did have another storm warning, so I don't know what's going on. But next time we'll try to have him. Okay, so here we go. Crypto Alchemist, have you seen the video of Putin singing Blueberry Hills Forever?
I know, right?
I have not seen that.
Yeah, you got to.
Oh my gosh, okay. Rodney Stubbert, the reason I watch so much true crime is that it's a whole lot easier to digest that stuff than this topic. Yeah, you're absolutely right. My gosh.
It's true.
My gosh. Yeah. Griffin Eagle 7 says it mirrors 1939 Germany. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are disturbing about this rabid narrative control and narrative war in the United States in the last couple of decades. With, I mean, we went through the cancel culture BS, and thank God that finally got rejected, and people are finally not worrying about the cancel culture idiots. The business of all the different sides, I want to say both sides, but all the different sides wanting to control narrative and, tell everybody what to think, what to say, what to do. And if you don't, we'll destroy your livelihood, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I say we are looking at the picture of the covert narcissist, one who's controlled by what we would call in Maya as the 7 serpents of ego, the 7 things that are a physical living entity represented as a matching serpent. Some of you guys have seen in Karakol, Chichen Itzai, what is used to say, oh, see, the Mayas committed self-sacrifice. That is not true. The true cosmology of that particular relief that I'm referring to at Chichen Itzai is an image of a man cutting off his own head. It's a mirror image. It's meant to be that way. We have 7 virtues and we have 7 egos. These primary entities, we can either feed them or we can starve them. And depending on which one you feed and which one you starve is coming to a point of whether you are virtuous or whether you work for the dark side, whether you have fed the spirit of lies, the spirit of manipulation, the spirit of bending the truth. These things do have relative in our spirit. And that's why it's also a spiritual battle that we're going through. It's something that if they take away our voice, if they take away our ability to govern the governors, what do we have? We have nothing but a cult that is telling us to sacrifice ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what the Maya said. That is not the Maya cosmology in that relief of the serpents eating themselves, essentially what we see as a man cutting off his own head. He's cutting the heads of the 7 serpents coming out at him. Anyways, that's a long drawn out way to tie it back to covert narcissism. We're looking at the exact same thing in a personality disorder when you are feeding these 7 serpents of ego, which are pain, torture, etc., etc. The opposite of 7
Okay,
virtues.
that's an interesting topic in itself. D. Dorothy Papineau says, my Ukrainian friends don't trust anyone. 5 million of them died of starvation after World War II. Well, remember what I said. The Soviet Union was not a good place, was not a good regime, and there's stuff, awful stuff that they did, yes. And remember, folks, keep in mind that when Putin talks about it, when we talk about these post-war 21st century Nazis, okay, involved in the Ukraine, this isn't, I'm sure there's millions of however many Ukrainians there are who they're not involved with this Nazification. They're not involved with this Nazi cabal. They are just, people from the Ukraine who are just trying to live their lives and such. What it is the people that are either running the show or controlling the people running the show. It's the presence in the places, the towers, the positions of power within the Ukraine. Okay. And it's like that anywhere. Okay. We, the people here in the U.S., my gosh, too many of our leaders, our political leaders are just, criminals and dishonest brokers and all this stuff. And the things sometimes that our government will do under the direction of the people running it, is just awful. It's not stuff that the people are involved in. It's not stuff that the people are always aware of. So yeah, you can, of course, there's much sympathy to be had for the Ukrainian people because they're the ones who are going to suffer for our military industrial complex, our intelligence apparatus pushing this conflict just because our guys have a boner to take on Putin and Russia because they didn't get their big war with the Soviet Union. So, and on and so forth. I know how these guys think. Okay. And so, yeah, the people always suffer, in these kinds of conflicts. That's without a doubt. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Brian Evan.
Sunny Sunday asks Walter, any thought on Argentina's president? I don't know enough about him. But I will look into it and learn more and come back and ask me again because if I learn a sufficient amount about something that I feel comfortable commenting on, I will comment. And of course, we know that Argentina has a past with post-war Nazis, right? So, Ryan Perella, I'd love to hear more about that Mayan mythology. Never heard it before. Well, Maliah's going to be doing a...
Wait. Let me correct though. Mayan cosmology.
Cosmology.
Not mythology. We're talking about the cosmology that we have written record in the various codices, various reliefs, stelas, this kind of thing, archaeological evidence, which gives us an idea of how the Maya truly interpreted the world around them, including the spiritual world. Now, that is accessible. The popular narrative would have you believe that we can't understand the Maya. That's not correct. So, yes, we talk about that often on our Saturday Walter and Maliah show because we are getting ready to go back to the Yucatan. And we hope everything is in the future. So we can make plans as best as we can. If it doesn't happen, then that really sucks. But with all of my hope, and Walter's excited about getting there too, long drawn out way to say we're getting to the Yucatan.
Yes. Yeah, we are going to try to make that happen. Real quick, D.E. Saccone asks, would you believe there are ties between Zionism and Nazism? I'm not going to get into that discussion.
Sure,
I'm not going to get into that discussion. I will tell you, read the book Perfidy by Ben Hecht. Perfidy, Perfidy is the title of the book. Perfidy. The author is Ben Hecht.
Yes.
Lemur Crazy. Any truth to Nazis being connected to the occult? Yep. There's a lot of truth to it. Yes. Who's got the dirty bomb? Oh, I think, more people than we'd be comfortable knowing. Probably, that's for sure.
Oh, and yeah, we got it right. Yeah, about our ties between Zionism and Nazism. Absolutely. I think so.
But we don't. But we don't want to go too far.
Yeah, exactly.
Into that topic. Thank you.
Exactly. Just gonna sum it up right there. It will get in packaged, but there's a lot to it.
You decide for yourself. I recommend reading the book Perfidy by Ben Hecht, and then decide for yourself. Let's see. Modwiz 125. Nobility is bestowed by embracing a noble ethos, not by genetics alone, right? We are suffering a dearth of nobility in our political classes. Yes. Yeah, we shouldn't even have an aristocracy in the United States.
Right?
We shouldn't even have it. In fact, something that shouldn't be is the term career politician. I'm one of those that no, those two words were never intended to go together. Okay, I'm not. The discussion of Zionism we're not getting into.
Right.
Do not assume my positions from my position to not discuss that here, okay? But look, a discussion on that topic inevitably goes down a negative road that I definitely disagree with. So I just don't like doing it here. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. We are suffering. American society is big time suffering.
Oh yeah, if you don't feel the economic crush of this past year, 2022, and now it's tax time, what'd you do last year? Because I as a grown adult, paying my bills and taking care of my stuff, it has been really hard.
So, well, we've been here for almost 2 hours. That's 30 minutes longer than we usually go. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm crying. Think it's economic time? Woes. I'm allowed to.
Think it's time for us to go?
Right. Well, thank you everyone for
thanks for the wonderful turnout. Really, this was a big, good crowd. And again,
those who watch us in the future.
Let me reiterate that today we were just trying to give you what we think is the background context of what Putin is referring to when he talks about he's on a denazification mission with the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And it's our position that that's true. He is dealing with denazification. Okay. And I do go into what he's talking about in this book, NYMZA, which you can get at walterbosley.com. And Nick read my mind.
Yeah.
He said, plug the book again. walterbosley.com, NYMZA, How America Sold Its Soul. Modwiz. Yeah, that's right. Leave radioactive subjects alone. Absolutely right.
Nice one, Mod.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Crypto Alchemist. Let's get one last one in here. Great work as always, Walter and Maliah. I will be in contact to schedule our next multi-stream together. Yes. Awesome. Yes. Let's make that happen. So, okay, folks, I think that's it for tonight. And I'm glad you guys liked it and found some value. And I hope that it didn't disappoint. I hope it doesn't disappoint anyone who might be watching it now. Again,
Crypto, wait. Crypto, you're going to have to save that question for when I'm on the show with you and Walter
oh yeah,
next.
there you go. There you go. That's
There you
right.
go.
That's
We'll
right.
answer
So,
that then.
okay, everybody. Again, thanks to all who gave the super chats. That's very generous of you.
Yes,
Really helps.
I know, right?
You
Sunny
know,
shade.
this isn't a hobby for
It's
me. This
incredibly
is our
difficult.
businesses. You know
Yes.
what we're doing here, bringing this stuff to you, and you know it's important to us, and we appreciate your appreciation. We truly do. So,
Bye.
and
Thank you.
have a good Saturday night, everybody, or whatever night you're watching this, and we will see you on the next live stream,
Which is Wednesday.
which is Wednesday, as always, and it's going to be a doozy. So you guys have a good night. We'll see you in a few days.